Wars make billions of dollars, and the war on drugs in particular is incredibly lucrative. It's a form of economic stimulus for the general white population and creates jobs. Millions of US citizens are tied, and increasingly more so, are employed in counterinsurgency. There's at least 2.3 million US military personnel around the world, and inside this country, there's at least 1.2 million federal, state, and local law enforcement employees inside the US, plus countless thousands of prison jobs and spin-off administrative, construction, lawyers, DAs, prison vendors, outfitters. It's big business. The US imposed illegal drugs worth $1 trillion a year on the African community, at least $1 trillion a year estimated by the United Nations to be gained, to be profited from the illegal drug trade worldwide, and a tremendous percentage of that is inside the US. And that money is not inside the African community, it's laundered through Wall Street and every kind of brokerage firm and bank and that kind of thing, you know, for the benefit of the bankers and white people throughout this country. Prisons are a multi-billion-dollar-a-year industry. Prisons are the third largest employer in rural white America. Afghanistan, we've heard about the war profiteering of Halliburton, Blackwater, which is now Z, Kellogg Brown and Root, Bechtel, GE. There have been exposés on that. But the US prison industry profiteering is enormous. Everybody, McDonald's, Citibank, AT&T, Nike, UPS, everything is tied to prison slave labor. Blood prisons. We hear about blood diamonds, we talk about blood prisons. It's a gold rush at the expense of African people. Prison payphones make $15,000 a day. 93% of paints and paintbrushes are made by enslaved Africans in prisons, 92% of stove assembly, et cetera, et cetera. Corporations and government make billions of dollars on enslaved African labor. Did you see all those pictures of people cleaning up the Gulf of Mexico? They were prisoners. They were prisoners. Those weren't volunteers. Those were Africans forced to do the dirtiest, most toxic jobs for nothing, for British Petroleum's benefit. Private prisons trade on Wall Street. CCA, which is one of the major prison industries, sells at least $21 a share and projects a 22% increase over the next 5 years with the economic situation going the way it is. The state of California has spent $35,000 per prisoner, and as an investment over the years, it has a $10 billion prison budget, and this is a way of basically creating jobs for white people. It's an economic stimulus before Obama's stimulus came in. It's been an economic stimulus for the last 30 years that's kept the white economy afloat. The war against the African people began with the enslavement of African people and the assault on Africa. Capitalism was born from the enslavement of African people. African enslavement is the foundation of US wealth and power. And Europe was poor, it was oppressed, it was disease-ridden, it had the plague, it had feudalism, it had a few people, lords and ladies, who controlled everybody else, who was tied to the land. And Europe became wealthy and powerful by launching out its ships into Africa, stealing the whole continent of African people and all of its gold and all of its resources, and coming to the Americas, committing genocide against the indigenous people, and stealing the resources and the land, and colonizing Asia and the Arab world and the majority of the planet. So we say that all white people sit on a pedestal of enslavement and genocide. The ongoing white colonial terror that we have carried out, the white population has carried out against African people in the US, brutal reign of torture and terror against African people that has gone on for hundreds of years, and the lynchings, which weren't some furtive fly-by-night kind of event, but an open public event that children came to, there was dancing that women came to, and it was the basis even for the county fair in the South. White America is 5% of the world's population, but it consumes 50% of the entire world's resources. This is why the African People's Socialist Party exists. It is working for liberation and unification of Africa and African people everywhere. It's based on the understanding that African people everywhere, whether they're in the US, whether they're in Brazil or Jamaica or Guyana or Nicaragua or in Britain or Germany or wherever else they are one people, and Africa is their homeland. It is completely a crime that De Beers and Shell Oil and all other kinds of corporations are there today plundering the vast and very lucrative riches of Africa, while African people are living on less than $1 a day inside the continent of Africa. Under the leadership of the African working class worldwide, the Uhuru movement is organizing the African Socialist International, an organization of African people and organizations all over the world working to liberate Africa for the benefit of African people, to feed African people, to control the resources, to have Africa's resources for African people. All of Africa's resources need to go back to African people. This is reparations. This is righting the historic wrong. White people can stand in solidarity. We don't have to keep our blinders on and pretend that we don't understand what it takes to fuel our lifestyle based on 50% of the world's resources being stolen from the mouths of everybody else on the planet, but that we can begin to open our eyes and hear what people have to say, what they're trying to tell us, that they have a right to live, they have a right to feed their children and to have control over their own lives and their own land. And in the Uhuru Solidarity movement, we reject peace and prosperity for us at the expense of anybody else, because that is no peace. That is no way of living. If we have to live with security systems all over our car, our houses, and everything else, this is no life. But what we want to see is a relationship with the peoples on the planet Earth. We want to rectify our relationship with African people. We want to say that this system is in a severe crisis, and it is not going to be solved by the people who created the crisis. It's not going to be solved by Wall Street and British Petroleum and all the other bloodsuckers who are out there to just fill their own pockets at the expense of the people and the planet Earth itself. But we want to stand in solidarity with African people, with indigenous people, with the peoples who will destroy this system and create a system in which human beings can live, and that we can live, as the chairman says, without borders, without war, without oppressors and the oppressed. And we can see that world, but we have to take on our work by going inside the white community and organizing other people just like ourselves to take a stand in solidarity, to wake up, get off that pedestal and join the rest of humanity. We work for reparations to African people. We stand on the side of African liberation. We want to right this historic wrong. Uhuru.
Thank you, Penny, for that really powerful presentation. I just wanted to say, I mean, the first half of that presentation, you know, it really just puts it all together and shows that that is not the reality that we face in our communities as white people. Any of that, the police presence, the war, you know, in every aspect of their lives, African people face this war. And I just want to really unite with what Chairwoman Penny said, that it doesn't have to be, you know, something that we support. There is another stand that we can take as white people. We can stand in solidarity with the African liberation movement and the right to resist of oppressed people around the world. And there is a movement in which you can take that stand, and that's the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. So I just want to, let's thank Penny again for that amazing presentation. Uhuru. So I want to take a moment and just invite the other panelists to come forward and take a seat at at the front here. And while people are doing that, I want to take a moment to introduce the next speaker. Diop Olugbala, who I said in the beginning, has come to us from Philadelphia. Many people will have heard of Diop from the question heard around the world when now President Barack Obama was running for president. He came to St. Petersburg. I guess he didn't think the Uhuru movement would have something to say about his visit, but he was very wrong. The International People's Democratic Uhuru movement was out in force at that presentation that he made just down the street at Gibbs High School, and Diop Olugbala stood up with a banner and called out the question, what about the black community, Obama? And that was the question nobody wanted to talk about. And besides that intervention into Obama's hopes and dreams, Diop has led a courageous, incredible campaign in the Northeast and across the country defending the African community. And he's the president of the International People's Democratic Uhuru movement and has taken on, has suffered the wrath of the police and the war against the African community himself when he took a stand in defense of the African community at City Council in Philadelphia and was attacked by the police for utilizing his so-called right to free speech, took on the state, took on a powerful campaign in the Northeast and across the country, and we're just really honored to have you here tonight. Please help me welcome Diop Olugbala.
Uhuru. One Africa, one nation. Uhuru comrades. So it really is good to be here at HQ with the Uhuru House in the city of African resistance, I call it St. Heat, because there's a reputation for African people bringing fierce resistance to white power here. And basically I see this entire discussion as one discussion. We just heard a very powerful presentation from Comrade Chairwoman Penny Hess in terms of, irrefutable evidence in terms of the U.S. government's war on the African community. And I want to unite with what Chairwoman Hess put forth, because indeed it is a war that's being waged on the African community. As I was watching some of the slides and the presentation, it was even reminiscent of things that I've even seen and witnessed